Hello and welcome to a very special edition of The Deep Dive. If you follow the Premier League, or if you just enjoy watching the carefully written scripts of football pundits get absolutely shredded to pieces, then you are definitely in the right place today.
You certainly are.
We are not just talking about a match. We are unpacking a moment where the entire narrative of the season didn't just shift it performed a complete handbrake turn at about 80 miles an hour.
It really, really did. We are, of course, dissecting Manchester United's 3-2 victory over Arsenal at the Emirates. And I think just calling it a victory feels almost inadequate, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
It was a heist, it was a thriller, and it was a tactical masterclass all rolled into one gloriously chaotic 90 minutes.
It just feels massive. Let's set the scene for you, especially if you might have missed the weekend's action. You have Arsenal sitting pretty at the top of the league, looking to extend their lead, playing at the Emirates where they have been, absolutely imperious all season.
Unbeaten at home, yeah. A fortress.
Exactly. And then you have Manchester United sort of scratching and clawing for that fourth Champions League spot, managed by interim head coach Mikel Carrick, who has only been back in the hot seat for, 2 weeks?
Not even that. And the context here is just everything. Carrick walks in after the Ruben Amorim era, which, believe me, we will definitely get into later, and he is immediately thrown into the absolute deep end.
Oh, completely.
His first two fixtures, Manchester City and Arsenal, the two best teams in the country, by a country mile. Logic, all logic, says he gets 0 points from that. Maybe, if he's lucky, he manages a respectable draw.
A sort of backs to the wall 0-0.
Right. Instead, he's walked away with 6 points. He's beaten them both. It's unbelievable.
It is the stuff of fairy tales, or perhaps fever dreams, depending on which side of the north-south divide you sit. But our mission today isn't just to read out the scoreline. Everyone knows it finished 3-2.
Of course.
We want to unpack how this happened. We've got a proper stack of sources here. Match reports from the BBC and Sky. We've got some deep dive tactical breakdowns from the diehards on Reddit, post-match comments from Carrick and Arteta, and even some fascinating, slightly spicy insights from Arsene Wenger himself.
Oh, the Wenger comments are particularly interesting.
Yeah.
He certainly didn't hold back, did he?
He really didn't. We're going to look at the tactical shifts, the player redemptions, and yes, hello, Harry Maguire, and this massive swing in fan sentiment from utter despair to just absolute euphoria.
It's been some turnaround.
So let's get into the match itself first, because, my word, this was not a straightforward 90 minutes of football.
Not in the slightest. It was a game of moments, wasn't it? A proper roller coaster. And to really understand the result, you have to look at the emotional swings within the game. Because if you just look at the first 30 minutes, this did not look like a United win.
Oh.
In fact, if you just tuned in then, you'd think a massacre was waiting to happen.
The sources are pretty unanimous on this, aren't they? Arsenal they were just dominating.
Completely. For that first half hour, it was total one-way traffic. Mikel Arteta had his side pressing incredibly high up the pitch. United couldn't get out of their own defensive third. They were suffocating.
It felt like a matter of time. You were just waiting for that first goal to go in.
You really were. It had that feeling of inevitability. And then the breakthrough does come in the 29th minute. But it wasn't a moment of brilliance from Bukayo Saka or a stunning strike from Martin Odegaard.
No, it was the dreaded own goal. Lisandro Martinez. You just hate to see it for any player.
It's so painful, isn't it? It wasn't an Arsenal player tearing the defense apart with skill or a clever move. It was just a scrappy, confused, horrible moment in the box. A deflected cross. Martinez is under pressure, and he basically just bundles it into his own net. It was ugly.
And at that point, looking at the Reddit threads from the match, the mood amongst the United fans was, resigned, is putting it very, very politely.
I think apocalyptic might be a bit closer to the mark.
I saw one comment that just said, "I'm sorry, Father, for I have sinned. I turned off the TV," and that was after half an hour.
But that just sums up the trauma of the last few seasons, doesn't it? The script is usually so predictable. Arsenal dominate, United concede, a calamitous goal, the heads drop, and they go on to lose 3-0.
We've all seen that movie a dozen times.
But this is where this deep dive gets really interesting. Because normally, especially under the previous management, they absolutely would have crumbled at that point.
Right. The floodgates would have opened.
They would have. But this time, they didn't. And just 8 minutes later, the entire game flips on its head. And it flips on a mistake from Arsenal's Martin Zubimendi.
Now, Zubimendi is usually so reliable, so composed on the ball.
Like a metronome. But here, he plays a really loose pass in midfield. A bit lazy, maybe. And who was there, sniffing around, waiting to pounce?
Brian Mbeumo.
The man for the big occasion. He really is, and we need to really appreciate Mbeumo's composure here. He intercepts that loose ball, but he still has a lot to do, you know?
It's not a tap-in.
Not at all. He's bearing down on goal at the Emirates. The crowd is hostile. He's 1-0 down in a massive game. He calmly rounds David Raya, which takes nerves of absolute steel, and just slots it into an empty net. So cool.
It looked effortless, and the sources are highlighting a pretty incredible stat regarding Mbeumo. He's becoming a bit of a giant killer, isn't he?
He is, yeah. A proper big game player. With that goal, Mbeumo became the first United player since Marcus Rashford back in the 22-23 season to score against Arsenal, Manchester City, and Liverpool all in a single season.
That is immense. That's not a fluke. It really speaks to his temperament.
It does. Some players, they seem to shrink when they see those big crests on the opposition shirts, and Mbeumo seems to thrive on it. He seems to grow.
And that goal, it wasn't just about the scoreline, was it?
No, it shifted the entire psychological landscape of the match. It was like a shot of adrenaline for United and a bucket of cold water for Arsenal. Suddenly, Arsenal realized they were in a proper fight.
Yeah.
They weren't just playing a punching bag that was going to roll over.
So we go into halftime level. 1-1. And you can just imagine the two team talks. But the second half, that's where the fireworks really, really started. And we have to talk about Patrick Dorgu.
We absolutely do. What a moment for the young lad. Just incredible.
50 minutes on the clock, the goal that's being called, the wonder kick.
It was a thunderbolt. I mean, we see goals described as screamers a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
But this was the dictionary definition of it.
It really was.
He receives the ball, and it's worth noting Bruno Fernandes is involved in the assist, which is a key tactical point we'll touch on later. And he unleashes this left-footed shot from well outside the box. It absolutely flies.
And is there a sweeter sound in football than the ball hitting the underside of the crossbar and pinging in?
There is not. It's aesthetically perfect. It's the sound of a pure, clean strike. But more than that, tactically, it was absolutely crucial.
How so?
Because that goal, going 2-1 up, it forced Arsenal to chase the game. They were behind at home. They had to push forward, commit bodies, take risks. And that is exactly what Carrick's setup wanted. It opened up all that space for the counterattack.
But as is the way with this fixture, it was never going to be plain sailing from there, was it? We have to talk about the equalizer, the 2-2 goal, because this is where the controversy really, really heated up in all of our source material.
Yeah, the Mikel Arteta goal in the 84th minute. Now, if you just look at the score sheet, it's a goal from a corner. Simple as that. But the build-up is what had United fans, and frankly the players as well, absolutely furious.
Benjamin Sesko went down in the build-up, didn't he? That was the issue.
Exactly. Just before Arsenal win the corner, Sesko takes a knock, potentially a head injury, and he stays down on the turf. The referee, however, doesn't stop play. He lets it continue. Arsenal win the corner, and from that resulting corner, they score.
Which is always going to feel unjust, whether it's technically the right call or not.
It is. And then you have the nature of that corner itself. Saw so many comments in the sources comparing Arsenal to a premium version of Stoke City.
That's harsh, but I see where they're coming from.
It's a narrative that is really gaining traction this season. And even Arsene Wenger alluded to it in his comments. The accusation is that Arsenal are deliberately crowding the goalkeeper, in this case the young Sen Lamens. They're basically turning the 6-yard box into a rugby scrum.
Blocking the keeper, fouling the keeper. The Reddit threads were on fire with this stuff. One user called it wrestling in the box. Another said it's just organized chaos.
And it's a very, very fine line, isn't it? It's effective, clearly, because they scored from it. But it leaves a really sour taste for the opposition who feel it's bordering on obstruction. They pack players right on top of the keeper so he can't move, he can't jump for the ball. It's not beautiful football, but it's brutally effective.
And this is the absolute key to the whole match, I think. United didn't let that injustice perceived or real derail them.
No. And this is the climax, minute 87. Just 3 minutes after conceding that gut-wrenching controversial equalizer. Most teams away at the Emirates would settle for the draw at that point. Take the point, get out of there.
Absolutely. Regroup, don't lose.
But not this United. And enter Matthias Cunha.
The defining moment. What a hit. But the build-up here deserves just as much praise as the finish, doesn't it?
It really does. It starts with Kobbie Mainoo.
Of course it does.
Of course. The sources describe a nutmeg pass involved in this setup. Just pure, unadulterated class, breaking the lines with one touch. But also, you have to look at the movement of Benjamin Sesko. He makes this brilliant, unselfish run.
The decoy run.
The perfect decoy run. He drags Gabriel and Saliba, two of the best center backs in the league, away with him, and that creates this tiny pocket of space on the edge of the box.
And Kuna did not waste that space.
Oh, he did not. A curled strike from about 25 yards out, bottom corner, absolutely unstoppable. Raya had no chance.
In his interview after the match, Kuna called it his 100% best moment in a United shirt. And you could see it, the celebration, him screaming into the camera. You could just feel the release of pressure.
It summed up the team's renewed passion perfectly. It wasn't just a goal. It was an exorcism of the last few months of frustration and, well, misery, really.
And while the goals were just spectacular and the drama was off the charts, I think the real story here, the true deep dive, is in the dugout. Because the contrast between the Carrick era, 2 weeks of it, and the Ruben Amorim era is just, it's night and day.
It could not be more different. And the sources are all using similar language to describe it. They're talking about simplicity versus system.
The vibes factor versus the process.
Precisely. All the reports coming out now suggest that under Amorim, things were incredibly tense. He was described by multiple sources as a rigid control freak.
That's a strong phrase.
It is. The feeling was that the players felt they weren't good enough because they couldn't perfectly execute this very specific, incredibly complex 3-4-3 system he was demanding. It was paralysis by analysis.
I've heard that players felt they were constantly being judged against theoretical ideal rather than the reality of the game in front of them.
Exactly. And then Carrick walks in, and what was the first thing he does?
He simplifies everything.
He just simplifies it. He tells them to play in their natural positions. He puts Bruno Fernandes back as a number 10 centrally, where he can create and take risks rather than being shunted out wide or forced to play deeper. He utilizes Amad Diallo and Mainoo properly. He essentially just said, you are all elite footballers. Go and play football.
It sounds so basic when you put it like that, doesn't it? Just go play, but maybe sometimes that's exactly what you need after being micromanaged within an inch of your life.
I think it is. But I want to be careful here not to paint Carrick as just a vibes manager, just a good motivator. There was a specific moment in this match that proved he has serious tactical acumen.
You're talking about the substitutions.
Specifically, the moment Dorgu got injured. Now, paint the picture for you. United are in a tight game, playing away at the league leaders. Patrick Dorgu, your wingback, goes down injured. The old instinct, certainly the Amorim instinct, or even Ten Hag before him, would be to bring on a defender.
Lock it down, 100%. Bring on Malacia or Mazraoui. See the game out, park the bus.
Exactly. You try to hold on to what you have, you consolidate. But what does Carrick do? He brings on a striker. He brings on Benjamin Sesko to partner Kuna up front.
That is incredibly bold. It's a huge gamble.
It's audacious.
Yeah.
And the Reddit users picked up on this immediately. One of the top comments was just, "Fortune favors the brave." It was a signal of intent. It told everyone, the players, the fans, and Arsenal, that United were here to win the game, not just to survive it.
And tactically, it worked a treat, didn't it?
Brilliantly. Because by keeping two strikers high up the pitch, he forced Arsenal to keep their defenders back. They couldn't just throw everyone forward in a desperate wave because they were terrified of being hit on the counterattack with two genuine threats. It kept Arsenal honest.
It's a massive departure from Amorim, who, as the fans noted online, would religiously swap center backs at 60 minutes, regardless of what was happening in the game. It felt robotic.
That's the perfect word for it. It was robotic management versus reading the room, reading the game. And, the record speaks for itself. Henry Winter pointed this out. Carrick, in his short spells as interim manager, has an absolutely incredible record against the big boys.
It is quite a stat when you look at it. He's beaten Arteta twice now. He's beaten Pep Guardiola. He's beaten Unai Emery at Villarreal.
For a guy who is technically a novice manager, he seems to have the number of these so-called tactical elites. Maybe, just maybe, he understands that sometimes the system isn't everything. Sometimes it's about the players.
And getting that kind of praise from Arsene Wenger is just the cherry on top, isn't it? What exactly did the professor say?
This is fascinating. Wenger congratulated Carrick specifically for winning away from home in a top-level match, which he knows is incredibly difficult. But then he contrasted the two teams' styles. He praised United for good build-up and cohesion.
Cohesion. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a word we have not associated with Manchester United in a very long time.
3 years.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then he described his former club, Arsenal, as having power and fighting, but not clean play.
Ouch. Not clean play. Coming from Wenger, the architect of the Invincibles and their beautiful football, that has got to cut deep for Arsenal fans.
It really does. It reinforces that premium Stoke narrative we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But for United to be recognized by Wenger for cohesion and build-up play, that is a massive testament to what Carrick has managed to instill in such a short space of time. He's got them passing and moving for each other again.
It's incredible. And it's not just the manager. The players have stepped up massively. We've touched on the goal scorers, but I really want to shine a spotlight on a few individuals who, according to all our sources, were just heroic at the Emirates.
Right. Where do you want to start? Because there are quite a few candidates for man of the match, I think.
We have to start with Matthias Cunha. I mean, the match winner. What an impact.
The King, as the fans are calling him on social media now, he came off the bench in the 69th minute. That's not a lot of time to make an impact, but he completely changed the dynamic of the attack.
The sources describe him as having flair and tenacity. And there's this narrative of redemption with him too, right? He's missed some big chances in the past.
He has, yeah. The game against Aston Villa was mentioned specifically in a few reports, where he missed a very similar chance to the one he scored. He could easily have let that haunt him, snatched at the chance. But here, he buries it with such confidence.
And beyond the goal, he just offers something different, that powerful ball-carrying ability. He drives at defenses, which terrifies them. He's rapidly becoming a genuine fan favorite.
He really is.
But if we're talking about redemption arcs, surely no one tops Harry Maguire.
Oh, absolutely not. The Harry Maguire renaissance is one of the standout stories of this match, and arguably the season so far under Carrick. It's just phenomenal.
I was looking at the stats in the source material. Did he really win 100% of his duels? Is that right?
100%. In 97 minutes of football against the league leaders at their own ground duels, aerial duels, he did not lose a single one. That is a monstrous, monstrous performance.
That is just unbelievable. It sounds like a made-up stat.
It does. And you have to remember, United have kept clean sheets from open play in the last two games against City and Arsenal since he returned to the lineup. He organizes that back line. He's a leader again.
The fan perception has completely flipped. They've gone from making memes about him to calling him Lord Maguire, Colossus, the Titan. It's quite the turnaround.
And it's well-deserved. And interestingly, the analysis from the Reddit threads points out he wasn't just defending. At one point, he was seen making these marauding runs up the wing. Fans were calling him Harry Dino and praising his long, raking diagonal passes.
Harry Dino. I absolutely love it. But it shows confidence, doesn't it? When Harry Maguire feels free enough to be overlapping on the wing, you know the team is feeling good about itself.
It shows a player who feels supported and free from the constant pressure and scrutiny. Again, you have to put that down to the Carrick effect. He's trusted him, put an arm around him, and Maguire is repaying that trust with interest.
Another player who deserves a huge mention is Patrick Dorgu. We talked about his incredible goal, but his overall game seems to be developing week by week.
He's a genuine rising star. The sources note he's playing this really interesting hybrid role. He's a winger when United have the ball, but a wing back when they don't. Defensively, he provides crucial cover for Luke Shaw against Bukayo Saka, which is a nightmare job for any player in the world.
And he's putting in the hard yards. The stats said 6 duels won, 6 possession wins. That's a proper shift.
It is. He's not just a flair player. There was a bit of a worry when he went off with that injury hamstring concern with the initial report, but later sources suggest it might have just been cramp or, dare we say, a little bit of dark arts time management.
A bit of professional game management never hurt anyone. And briefly, a word on the goalkeeper, Sene Laimons.
Yeah, he was excellent. Makes some vital saves, 3 big saves in total. The Reddit threads were full of comparisons to Onana, with many arguing that Onana might have conceded 1 or 2 of the shots that Laimons saved.
Yeah.
He just looks very assured, very calm, under intense pressure for a young keeper.
And finally, let's circle back to Bryan Mbeumo. We mentioned his goal, but the fans are now calling him the best signing since Bruno. That's huge praise.
It's the highest praise you can get at United, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's hard to argue with right now. He brings goals, he brings what the fans call vibes, and he brings a relentless work effort. He's a proven big game player. He never goes missing.
So United are flying high. The mood is ecstatic. But we have to look at the other side of the coin. Arsenal.
Yes. The mood in North London is very, very different.
The narrative coming out of the Arsenal camp, and certainly from their rivals, is, well, it's mixed, isn't it? Are they bottling the title race? Or was this just a bit of bad luck?
It's a bit of both, I think, but that bottling narrative is growing louder by the day. They're still top of the league, let's be absolutely clear about that. But the gap is shrinking fast. It's now only 4 points to City and Aston Villa.
And that's now 3 games without a win for them. They drew with Liverpool, they drew with Nottingham Forest, and now they've lost to United. That's not a blip, that's a wobble.
That is championship-winning form turning into a proper wobble. And that comparison to Stoke City is really starting to stick, which will damage their reputation.
The reliance on the scrums at corners.
Exactly. When you rely so heavily on set pieces and those dark arts, fouling the keeper, time wasting, that sort of thing, and then you lose. You don't get any sympathy. You just look like a team that is run out of creative ideas in open play.
After the game, Arteta complained about the strange way they lost.
He did. He called United efficient, almost as if it were a criticism. But efficiency wins titles. And there's a fascinating stat from Andy Mitten that I think just sums up Arsenal's entire day.
Oh, go on then.
Before this match, Arsenal had won every single game this season in which they scored the first goal.
Yeah.
24 games in a row.
Wow. That's an incredible record.
If Arsenal scored first, they won. That was just the rule. It was a statistical certainty. Until Mikel Carrick's Manchester United came to town and broke the streak.
That is a massive record breaker. And it psychologically damages that feeling of invincibility that Arsenal had built up at home.
It proves they can be got at. It proves that if you can just weather that initial storm, if you don't panic when they score first, they are perhaps a little bit fragile underneath it all.
So looking at the fallout, Section 5 of our deep dive, fan sentiment. I mean, scrolling through Radio Devils on Sunday night was it was pure, unadulterated joy.
It was euphoria, absolute euphoria. I was seeing quotes like, "We are so back. What is this feeling? I haven't felt this good about the club in a long, long time."
Yeah.
It's a complete 180 from the toxicity we saw at the end of the Amorim era.
It's amazing what 2 wins against your biggest rivals can do for the mood. But it begs the question, and this is the big debate raging in all the comment sections, the Carrick question. Should he get the job permanently?
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The one everyone is asking.
The pro-Carrick camp is very loud and very convincing right now, they're saying. He understands the club's DNA. He gets results in the big games. The players clearly love playing for him. Give him the contract now.
And it's a compelling argument. If you beat City and Arsenal back-to-back, with the squad and the state it was in, you absolutely deserve to be in the conversation. You simply can't ignore those results.
But of course there are skeptics.
There are always skeptics. And to be fair to them, they make a very valid point.
Yeah.
They're comparing this to the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer era, the new manager bounce.
We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, they're saying.
Exactly. The concern is that this is just a short-term high, born of the freedom from a restrictive previous manager. The skeptics are all saying the same thing. Wait until we play the smaller teams. Wait until we play Fulham next week.
Why Fulham specifically? What's the fear there?
Because Fulham will come to Old Trafford, and they will sit deep. They will play a low block. They will put 10, maybe 11 men behind the ball. And United have historically, for years, struggled to break down those kinds of defensive teams.
Right.
Carrick has shown he can outsmart Pep and Arteta when the game is open, and United can play on the counter or exploit space. But can he coach a team to methodically break down a packed 10-man defense? That is the great unknown variable.
That's a really important distinction. It's one thing to win a 5-goal thriller at the Emirates. It's a completely different challenge to grind out a 1-0 win against a team that doesn't want to play football with you.
Precisely. That requires a different kind of coaching, a different kind of patience and structure in attack.
There was also a really interesting point from Laurie Whitwell in his column about the club's recruitment.
Yes, this was a very fair point and a good observation. He said it was a great day for the recruitment department. And when you look at it, he's right. Look at the scorers. Mbeumo, Dorgu, Kuna. Look at the key contributors. Lamens in goal, Sesko with his crucial movement.
These are all recent signings from the last year or so.
They are. And that recruitment team has taken a lot of criticism over the last year, some of it deserved. But Whitwell points out that they all stepped up in the biggest game. It's a form of vindication for the scouting team. It suggests the players were good enough all along. They just needed the right manager and the right environment to flourish.
Which brings it all back to the manager.
It always does at a club like Manchester United.
So let's wrap this up with a look ahead. What does this massive result actually mean for the rest of the season?
Well, the immediate implications are huge. United are now up to 4th in the table. They are firmly in the Champions League hunt. If they win their game in hand, they could solidify that position very quickly and start looking up rather than over their shoulders.
And as a personal achievement from Mikel Carrick, he remains unbeaten as a manager against both Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola.
Not a bad line to have on the CV, is it? Regardless of what happens next.
So the next fixture is Fulham at Old Trafford.
And, as we've just discussed, that is the real test. I would encourage you, the listener, to watch that game very closely. Don't just watch for the excitement or the goals. Watch for the structure. Watch what United do when they have 70% of the possession, and Fulham have all their players in their own half. Do they have ideas? Do they have patterns of play? Or do they just run out of steam and start crossing it aimlessly?
That game will give us the answer on whether this is a real, sustainable change or just a temporary bounce.
It absolutely will.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something to chew on this week. We've talked a lot about the new manager bounce and the obvious comparisons to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but is it possible that this is something more than that?
What do you mean by that?
Well, is it possible that Mikel Carrick hasn't just unlocked a bounce, but has actually stumbled upon a tactical blueprint that the so-called elite coaches like Amorim completely missed? Amorim was so obsessed with his sister, his three at the back, his specific rotations. Maybe he was so focused on his way of playing football that he missed the obvious strengths of the world-class players right in front of him. Maybe, just maybe, top-level football sometimes really is as simple as putting your best players in your best positions and letting them play with a bit of freedom.
It's a very provocative thought,
Right.
that sometimes the smartest guys in the room just overthink it. And sometimes the guy who just comes in and says, lads, it's Arsenal, is the one who walks away with the 3 points.
Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, as they say. Well, we will certainly find out against Fulham. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an absolute blast to unpack.
A pleasure as always. What a game.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our analysis of that Fulham game next week. We'll see if the Mikel Carrick fairy tale continues. Until next time.